So I am an LPC, a licensed professional counselor, and I was in my practicum and needed to find somewhere to receive some additional hours. And so I kind of looked up on it. I was looking for somewhere to find it at one of U of H's job boards. And I said, hey, this sounds like a cool, population. I don't know a lot about that population. I want to be able to serve everyone with therapy. And so I went and applied for the program coordinator position. I was just going to run groups. And I got there, was amazed by it, loved it. And the program director that was there at the time was leaving. She was moving back to California. And they said, hey, do you want to give this position a try? I said, no. No. Right? I don't know what to do. And they said, we'll teach you. And I said, well, absolutely. So it literally just fell into my lap. And I've been there ever since. This was the end of 2017. So I've been the program director there since then. Yeah.
And for someone who knows nothing about it, tell me what you do. So
we are a drop-in center, and it's very different from a center who has a case management model. So if you have a case management model, you're using a system to track the youth. A drop-in center is built to have emergency needs done in that day. So they're dropping in to receive services that day. So what we do as a drop-in center is provide emergency need services and then referrals to long-term services for LGBTQ plus youth who are experiencing homelessness and their allies. I have on my ally shirt, and they're allies. And an ally means that you may not be in the community, but you are affirming of, supportive of, encouraging of that community. And so we serve youth up to the age of 25. And they can be experiencing homelessness, whatever it is that means for them, right? Because it can be anywhere from sleeping under a bridge to couch surfing to living with relatives, but that is not your permanent dwelling. And so because there's a big gauge and range of what that looks like, our services have to range in that way as well. You may have someone that comes in and says, hey, I don't have enough food because I live with my grandparents and I just need to eat. And there's individuals who said, I'm sleeping outside, I don't have anything. And so we have to provide those emergency needs services to them. So we have to meet them where they are. And so our goal is to, as a mission, is to help those youth gain whatever it is that they need, that they've identified they need to survive and thrive in that current situation.
For people who are going to see this and maybe it may not have ever crossed their mind that a child would be put out by their own family. Walk me through a situation where that has happened and explain to someone would never cross their mind, maybe they're a parent, and they could never imagine putting their own child out on the street. Yeah. How does that happen?
I think that one of the largest barriers with this population is the misconceptions and the myths associated with the LGBTQ population. Many of our youth either have parents who do not agree with the same-sex relationships, whether it be because of their personal beliefs or their religious beliefs. And then there are situations where they're saying, I accept you, but not your entire lifestyle. So many of our youth, and we call them youth because even though they may be 18, 19, they're still teens. And even in your early 20s, if you've experienced some level of trauma, typically the age you experience that trauma at is the age in which you function. So many of them understood that they were in that community, wherever they identified at, earlier on, 12, 13, didn't tell anyone, didn't come out. And so that age is where they still are functioning a lot of times. So we have a 21, 22-year-old who's still functioning down here, maybe in the 13, 14, 15 age range. And so for those individuals, if the family is not affirming of that, they may accept them, but not their lifestyle. So they said, I don't want to stay here. So some youth have left on their own because I'm not accepted. Some have been made to leave. They've been kicked out. Some of them are find themselves, they're not room anymore, right? So they're living in lower income neighborhoods and families and communities where the family has multiple children. And so the older adult was going to have to move anyway. But their sexuality created other barriers, or their identity or preferences created other barriers for them. So we find a large gamut of that. But I will tell you a story that was very significant for me and what has kept me, because I'm not a part of that community. I'm not lie. But what kept me working there, for those of you who are watching who don't get that, what really stuck out to me, it was Hurricane Harvey. and we were gathering care packages and things like that to give out and trying to find shelter and things like that. And I had family members who were bringing these things to their children, but they would not let them come home with them. They were bringing boots, they were bringing tents, but they cannot come home. And it was that level of their minds were just made up that if you want to live your life in this way, you are not welcome in my home. And even a circumstance like a hurricane that can be life-threatening didn't change that. And that was very significant for me because it allowed me to see just how much of a crisis many of these young adults were really in.
Well, how did that make you feel in that moment?
Oh, it's devastating. It's heartbreaking. And because you have to go back inside and go, hey, I just spoke to your parent and you still can't come. Or I have to tell you, I don't have anywhere for you to go. When I first started working at Tony's Place, and Tony's Place is named after Tony Carroll. He was a philanthropist in the community and also a professor at U of H. And he did a lot of social work around all things social work, actually. But he found that it was a disproportionate amount of young adults who were experiencing homelessness and then were also in the LGBT population. He wanted to know why. One, why was it such a large percentage? And then also, how did any of that affect it? How was it? What was the cause and effect? And in doing some of that research, he realized that being able to get shelter, education, jobs, those types of things, there was a lot of stigma and barriers related, not just because you're a young adult, but also because you're in that community, specifically for the trans community. And so my heart breaks for that because these are individuals who are just starting their life, right? And I'm just trying to figure out where I fit in the world, and I don't even have it figured out. So you want me to have it figured out. You want me to be able to articulate it to you. And then you want me to understand how to use the system, if you will, to mitigate those barriers. And they just don't have those skills. And so you're watching individuals where I got to come in and tell you, I'm not sure how to help you. And I know you're in crisis and there's nothing really I can do about it. There's nowhere for you to go. There's not a lot of young adult shelters here now, transitional living. They're too young to handle things on their own as adults, and they're too old to receive services that the children would. So they're in a very unique situation.
And so your organization's working to fill that
Absolutely.
gap. Tell me how. What services do you provide?
So immediate services are showers, laundry. We have a shower room, a laundry room where they can come in and wash their clothes. We're going to give you a hot meal, and then we're also going to give you snack items and food that you can take to go. We have a clothing closet where you can come in and once you shower, get clean undergarments and clothing, toiletries. We have testers that are coming in that are testing for STDs and STIs, but also for the lower level medical issues that you would get at a regular physical, blood pressure, those types of things. And if they are elevated or have any issues with that, we'll make a referral out to partners in the community. So we do a lot of partnerships, a lot of collaborations with community for that reason. So immediate needs, we use Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And at the bottom of Maslow, it says, the bottom of it is talking about food and water and air, right? So now that you've eaten and you've taken a shower and you feel a little bit better, you're full. Now I need to understand where you're going to go, right? What is your safety, security going to be in terms of structure? So that's our first, where are you going to go when you leave here? Can we get you into a shelter? Can you go back home? Can we call a friend? And then from there, so our referrals are based on where they are in that hierarchy. And so once we determine that, then we make those referrals. It may be to education, getting you back into school, using the McKinney Veto Act, which basically says wherever the last school you attended, you can also attend a new school without having to re-register and get all your schoolwork because you've been determined homeless. We are referring to mental health professionals, if that's what you need, if there's some instability with mental health, substance use, if individuals are coming in and have issues with that. So whatever the issue is, no matter what it is, we're going to find a referral, someone in the community in Houston who can help support that, and we're going to refer you to that. Rather we have to take you on our own, we're giving bus passes, we're paying for you to Uber there, we're preparing job interviews, setting them up for you, doing to help you fill out applications if you don't know how to do that. So wherever they are, we meet them where they are. There's not a set of services. The services are created, whatever it needs to be to fit the individual need.
I want to ask you about the world we live in right now. It's been tough, really, for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. But for the LGBT community, there have been a lot of challenges that have been created by whether it's lawmakers or members of society of recent, particularly targeting the trans community. I just wanted to hear from you. The audience for this are employees of the company who, we have news employees, journalists, but we also have people working in creative services and we're working in the community. We have salespeople, we have engineers, who don't have exposure to these issues regularly. Some people do, a lot of people don't. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective how those efforts on legislative levels in Texas and elsewhere have impacted the community directly and indirectly through creating stress and crisis and other issues, mental health issues. Just your take on that.
I think that we'd have to start with the fact that many of the lawmakers and all the other gamut of folk who are making the decisions about this community does not include that community. And I think that any population, any culture of people, any community of people who are having to make decisions should include that community. So you create a barrier just out of the gate because you have no level of understanding or no level of reference because you're creating these systems for a group of people who you know nothing about. And so because of that, you're making a lot of the barriers come in, I think, because of that. There's not a clear understanding. It's what we think are going to happen. It's the myths about what that looks like. For example, I had a parent come in and he said, my son's gay. I said, okay. He said he wants to be a girl. And I said, well, that's not what that means. And it really I had to take a step back and go, we're in 2022 and you have parents who still think that there's not a difference between just identifying as gay and having a sexual preference and then having identity. There's a difference between who I am attracted to sexually, who I want to be in relation with, than who I identify with. You can have a trans individual who does not identify with the gender in which they were born and they still consider themselves to be straight. So there's a lot of misconceptions there, and because of those, I think when laws are created in a way that may be intended to be protected, I'm not sure what the intent always is, but I do know that the barriers tend to be associated with the fact that they don't understand the needs. And if you're going into any community that was oppressed or any community that is underserved, and I'll talk about the African American community because I can, if you don't have those individuals a part of that conversation, you're going to create systems that they can't use or don't need or don't want because they're not a part of the conversation. So a lot of the laws are created without the conversation being had with individuals who would be affected by it.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
The youth that you serve, I'm sure there comes to a point, I think what your hope would be, the organization's hope would be that they can thrive at some point, that they can take the help that you've given them and use it to succeed and thrive. Can you give me an example or a story that sticks out with you where you've been able to set someone on a path, a successful career path or a successful life path? Yeah, absolutely.
So we have a program that's set up even through Tony's Plus as an alumni. And so once they have been stably housed and are working or volunteering or at school, something that's stable, once they've done that for a year, we invite them to come back and be a part of our team. So we see a lot of those success stories where they're saying, hey, I'm ready to come back. I have it together. And it's good for them because I don't have a frame of reference either for being in the LGBT population, nor have I ever experienced any level of homelessness. So their take on it and their approach on it is going to be different even from mine as the program director. So we have a lot of individuals who are able to succeed in that way. But what I think the takeaway should be with that question is it often doesn't happen on the first try. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of getting housed and then losing it and then getting it again and losing it because they haven't learned how to sustain it. So part of the breakdown and what we try to do at Tony's Place to bridge that gap is not only to assist you in getting the services, but also teaching you how to utilize the service. If I give you an apartment, but you don't know how to budget any money, or you've never had a stable job and so you're showing up late, or you don't have a car or money to get on the bus and so you get fired because you can't make it to work. So there's these levels of things that are going on. were on the street for a while and started to use drugs. Now you have a substance use issue and can't pass a drug test in order to get a job. Or I've been displaced from my home and I don't have an ID, or I don't have a driver's license, and so I can't get a job even if I can work. So the success, I also think, shows up on the spectrum, and you have to look at success different, and you have to gauge it differently based on each individual. So I see a lot of success across the board in each individual that we help, if they're able to take whatever it is they came in for and utilize it. So success doesn't always look like just not being homeless anymore. It can look like, hey, I'm just sober now. It can look like, hey, I just accept myself now. I'm no longer cutting. I'm no longer attempting suicide. So that success, I think, has to be counted and gauged on the spectrum for each individual, because it's going to look different.
Talk about, so you sort of weaved in the whole idea that a lot of the people that you help end up coming back as volunteers. Mm-hmm. How do you operate in terms of volunteerism? Mm-hmm. How can people join that effort? Yeah. So we have on our website, tonysplace.org.
There's a volunteer application on there, and they require a background check, and we ask that because obviously we want to make sure that our youth are safe, and we want to know why an individual is coming to volunteer. Most of the time the thought is, I'm coming to help. There's a misconception, I think, about what help looks like with the homeless population, because the assumption is that they should just take whatever we give them. If I donate clothes, they should want to wear them. Why would they not want to wear that? Or why would they not want to eat that? Well, if you have any teenagers or any young adults, they're very picky still with clothing, the music that they listen to, the brands of cell phones that they have. You'd be surprised how many is like, is that an iPhone? Is that an Android? What number is it? Because they're still kids. And so we ask that volunteers come in and they fill out that application, because we're asking questions to gauge where they are with that. Because we have direct services with our members, and we call them members and not clients, because they felt like client or patient felt like I was in a hospital or something was wrong with me, or you diagnosing me. So we use members as a term to include them and to identify them. So we make sure that they're a good fit for our members, because everyone can't volunteer in that way. And if you can't and your service is still needed, we have some indirect things that you can do. So we ask that the volunteers fill out that application so that we know when they come in how to match them best and to use their skills best. We have a volunteer orientation where we talk about some of these things we're talking about now, and then we have a full volunteer training that is done virtually and in person, so they can come in and see. And then I always tell them to volunteer twice and then check in with me. Once you get an opportunity to see it and feel it and understand, hey, this is not really what I thought it was, or I think I'd be a better fit doing this for you. And we just work with you until we find what you need. I'm really open as a program director. I tell everybody to come and I'll figure out what works for you. But I like to be very transparent in that way, because it's a very difficult population to work with. You know, young adults are difficult anyway. But the homeless population is extremely difficult because they come through the door in crisis. The fact that they're homeless, they're already in crisis. And if you don't deal well with crisis, if you don't have really good crisis intervention skills, even though we will teach some of that, they just may not be the space for you. So understanding what you're coming to do and who you're coming to help is really, really important with our volunteers. But we provide all of that knowledge so that people can make an informed decision.
Understanding the audience for this,
yeah.
What do you want people to walk away after an hour of learning? So it's an hour of learning. This will be part of it. We have some folks. We have a Pulse nightclub survivor joining. We have other community members from other cities who do similar work.
Okay.
What would you like folks who maybe not even be in the allyship world yet, but are open to learning? What do you want them to take away from this?
At the end of the day, if we can operate on a human level, as opposed to all the things that we have different from one another, I think that our world in general will be a better place. We have a tendency to focus on what we don't understand, or what is different, or what is different from our beliefs, as opposed to the things that we share similarly, which is just the human factor, right? Our job at Tony's Place as an ally and as an affirmer is to say that these individuals have nothing different than what you are. It doesn't make me any different than you because I have a different preference in terms of sexuality or how I identify myself. So when you're trying to connect with that and figure out, how to put it in a box or how to understand it, it's you. it is the same people that you name that is the target audience. It's them. It's their children. It's their grandparents. This has existed and will continue to exist. Just because it's not being said out loud, just because you're not privy to it, doesn't mean that it's not happening. And the issues that they're facing are everyday issues. And many of us are 1 or 2 paychecks away from being in the same situation anyway. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you sleep with and who you identify or how you identify in terms of gender. That's not what's important. What's important is that you're living in your purpose and you found a way to be a part of community. And if we would start there and focus there, that would be, to me, the biggest takeaway, taking out those things that make us uncomfortable and just allowing people to live their lives.
Anything else I didn't touch on that you want to add?
No. Well, I will say this. There's a difference between, we as a nonprofit operate on private donations. So we don't use any government funding or any of those things. And the reason for that is that I am very flexible in my thinking, and I want to be able to execute it based on how I see it in my head. And you can't always do that when you get government funding, because it puts parameters around that. But also because of that, it puts us at a disadvantage because we can't always do the things that we want to do. Our staff is a staff of 3. We have a staff of 3 individuals. Only one of those individuals are full-time. And then we have 2 part-time people, and we use all of our volunteers. So volunteer help is huge because we rely on them to help us come in. And the overhead and the money that we make, we want to use it on our members. We don't want to pay staff, essentially. I don't think I've had a raise since I got there, and that's okay. And then we have a backing of a board member. We have a 6-pedal board. But I say that because donations are extremely important as well. Donations of time, donations of supplies, donations of money is important. Because of the barriers you talked about earlier, we need to be able to maneuver those things without having to follow the government's direction all the time, because they are the ones who are also creating some of those barriers. So I just think that's important for folks to know too. We do this in a way that is it's hard work. It takes a lot of work. You don't never get off. I don't never cut off. Because you can't. You're dealing with people who are in crisis often. So it's just a difficult job to do. It's a difficult population to work with. People are really struggling. Your young adults, your youth are really struggling, and they're the youth of tomorrow. So if we don't help them, then what does our world turn into? So that's the huge part for me, and I just appreciate being able to say that it's really important to have these conversations, and I'm glad you guys are doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And all you're doing.
Thank you.
It's wonderful.